Less than 1% of our people survived. And here we are, our language is still alive. There's this thing with colonialism that I've noticed. The colonizer will always blame those being colonized of doing what the colonizer's doing. All those voices in your head saying you're not good enough, that's colonialism. Everything that you've ever owned still exists on Earth. That's really what we need to be managing, is our impact on the world around us. What we're trying to do is to create some balance and some reciprocity so that our kids will have something, because at this rate, we are racing toward a cliff. Wait, Puchadep, Nuskmata and Squext, Yos Madam Cooks, and Sla Nuskmata. My name is Muskmata, and we're here at my home in northern Secwépemc in the community of Secwépemc, which is part of the Quetzal First Nation. And we're the northernmost Secwépemc community here, the top of the canyon. And the second language I introduced myself is in Nuxalk, so I'm also from the Nuxalk Nation on what is now known as Central British Columbia, Central Coast British Columbia.
Thank you so much for, right now we're on your land right here, and underneath what looks like a cabin. But
Yeah.
This is actually your deck.
Yeah, it's an indoor-outdoor cabin. Yeah. Yeah. It was all built. My brother built it, and it's all built out of the trees in the yard. So pine and fir, mostly some spruce.
Let's do a little tea introduction here. You made some tea for us today.
Oh yeah.
And it's first off delicious.
Oh good.
And secondly, I love your taste in mugs.
Oh, yeah.
This is exactly what I would find in my house. Would you like to share yours first here?
Well, this one says colonizer tears with a beautiful rainbow on it, which I feel is just awesome.
Yeah.
This was gifted to me by my daughter-in-law, and I was like, nice. She gets me, right?
She understands.
Totally. Yeah. And actually that mug I picked out I just love the trees on there. It actually really reminds me of this place, and it just growing up in the trees. It's almost kind of like an inverse of when it's dark, and you can just see the trees.
Like the negative silhouettes.
Yeah.
Like the trees almost feel like they glow a little bit compared to the pitch blackness, especially out here at night, right? So
yeah, at nighttime, especially on a clear night, it's quite dark here, so you can really see the stars. So that reminds me of like the stars and the tree line, and the tea was all hand harvested, either by myself or my son, or was gifted from friends.
Awesome. Well, would you like to share a little bit about what you're doing in the community?
Yeah, well, here in northern Secwépemc, I work with my mom on a small charity called the Moccasin Footprint Society. Mm-hmm. And the work is all grassroots driven. So whatever's happening and being organized in the community or whatever needs support is the work that we're involved in. So you'll never see our logo on anything because it's all there for different kinds of support. Yeah. And we work within the community as community members. And right now she's working on a bunch of different projects that is all in the lines of protecting our river, which is now called the Fraser River. But before that, we had our own names, and Sadetqua just means river. And there's all kinds of protections that need to happen because the salmon are really endangered. And we used to spend a lot of time down in the river in the summertime fishing, and everybody had smokehouses going, and you don't see that anymore. There's so much pollution dumped into the river. So
yeah,
that's
the land's
really
being
tough.
poisoned.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And not enough is being done to actually raise awareness of it. If anything, what's happening here is probably trying to be pushed under the rug, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, for sure. Like we had the Mount Polly mine disaster in our backyard, and what happened? They ended up going on to get awards for cleanup, which is crazy. There was no fines and there was no substantial law changes.
Yeah, a colonial solution to a colonial problem.
Yeah,
right, which is what we see all the time.
Totally, and they just. engineered enough to go back into business.
Yeah.
And now they're wanting more expansions, which is the reason why the first one failed. So it's crazy. So that's a lot of the work that's happening here is around raising awareness around the river and salmon, protecting water.
The mine disaster, would you like to share a little bit more about what that exactly was? Like what happened there?
Yeah, so in 2014, the Imperial Metals is the big parent company, has a bunch of different mines. And one of them is Mount Poly Mine, which is about an hour drive from here, fully within our homelands of Secwépemc. And in 2014, the tailings dam, which holds all of the waste, where they store all of the waste, the dam broke. And so like millions and millions and millions of liters of waste, water, and the ground rock, and like heavy metals, and also like processed sewage from Vancouver gets dumped into these waste facilities.
All the way from Vancouver?
All the way from Vancouver, it's shipped up.
Wow.
Yeah. And so all of this was all in there, and a huge amount of it came out when the dam failed. It all just came rushing out, and it scoured down the mountainside into the natural drainage through Hazeltine Creek down into Quesnel Lake. And it was a major environmental disaster. And the only waste that was removed was to, fix the tailings dam and to go back into production. And so that really impacted fisheries, that impacted people's livelihoods, people's businesses, like all the ways that people depend on the land and the water out there were impacted.
Well, yeah, it's not just one small thing, right? Just everything in nature, one thing goes out of balance, the entire ecosystem goes out of balance.
Yeah, and it sent huge shockwaves through the mining community, because it was like, oh, these are the same dams that we have like in a lot of places. So people in different communities, like in Southeast Alaska and other places, like in Tahltan territory, the Red Chris mine was the mine that was being built off the profits of Mount Poly mine. So up in Tahltan territory, they were saying, well, you guys told us that this would be safe, and you told us that the dam was exactly the same as Mount Poly. So now we're really concerned, right? So there were a lot of different reports and, all kinds of research, but nothing substantial changed. And I was even on a global tailings review panel as an advisor, community advisor to this group. And they wrote a report and gave their recommendations, but nothing has really changed. Nothing substantial has changed.
Just surface level stuff, right?
Yeah. It's enough to look good to say we did this report and this report, but they sit on a shelf and they don't get implemented. So.
Yeah. You see that happening. It's a pattern that happens throughout every single disaster that happens through Indigenous communities, right?
Yeah. Capitalism is at a completely suicidal pace.
Absolutely. And it's been this way for a while.
For a long time, yeah. Like I think about like our communities and how our communities move at the speed of the seasons, our communities move at the speed of the land, and being within that, especially if you are still really connected and you go out and you're harvesting or just spending time in nature, you're really in tune with what's going on. Like for example, there are green soapberries out right now a month ahead of when they usually are here on the land. And because the climate has shifted so much, we wouldn't know that unless we were going out and doing that. Because last year we missed them. We were looking a month late, and so, but capitalism is like the next quarter. It's like the end of the day, business hours, like what's going,
it's
long-term planning is like 2 years. It's like, that's half a salmon cycle. Like that's crazy.
Just like you said, we go along with the seasons, and every season has its own teaching of how it's supposed to be reflected onto us, how it's supposed to be reflected on the land and the animals that live within it, which is us. We are part of this world. We're not above it. We're not here to take advantage of it. We're not here to use all of its resources. We're here to just simply be alongside it.
Okay. Totally. Yeah. Like we're part of the system. Everything's connected to everything. So you can't think like you're going to throw anything away. It's still here. I saw this thing the other day and it said, everything that you've ever owned still exists on Earth. And it kind of was just like, whoa. And it really made me think of all my like stuff and this demand for more stuff and how convenient it is. My mom always says, convenience will be the death of us all.
Oh, absolutely.
And so like thinking about how do I slow things down in my own personal life? How do I simplify? How do I share the wealth that I have by gifting, by, thrifting, by just trying to use what's already there. Because I see the impacts of greed on our land everywhere you go. Like the forests are completely so heavily impacted by clear-cut logging and roads, and then once those roads and those clear cuts are in, then you have drill pads going in looking for oil or gold or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then you have like hydroelectric dams, and then these giant like machinery that's run on diesel, and now everybody's like, oh, electric's the way, electric will save the future. It's like that all requires mining.
Yeah, it's not a solution
No,
by
like,
any means,
things don't
especially
just come out of thin air.
yeah, especially given the fact that we're trying to find these solutions not for the idea of sustainability, more so for the idea of just mass production for all of us. It's another gadget for everybody to buy,
Yeah.
right? So it's not going to be replacing fossil fuels. It's not going to be replacing any of that. It's going to be just another device for us to get.
Yeah, it's just
Right.
adding more demand, really.
Exactly.
Right? It's like inflation. Somebody was talking about inflation. They're like, well, what is inflation? They're like, people just start charging more.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that's because of the market, whatever. It's like, no, that's what shifts the market. People just start charging more.
Even just the fact that minimum wage has never gone up along with inflation, that shows that it's being manipulated by something else.
That's what I love about spending time on the land, is that like there's no crazy, like radical surprises, or like you're not going to be like, oh my gosh, like this tree's like purple this year or something. It's just like it's like consistent and natural, and that when you go to the land, you can really feel like you belong, and that that you can be there and just be there in the presence of others without having to like prove anything or do anything.
Well, nature reminds you that it's relative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the consistency out here, the seasons will always be the seasons. And the thing that causes inconsistency of the land that we're on is the human impact that we're constantly bombarding it with. Right?
Totally. That's what I tell people. I was like, I don't know why they call it like salmon management. It's like, we're not managing
we're not
salmon.
Controlling.
Yeah. It is like, we're not managing salmon. Has the salmon ever listened to you?
No.
We're managing human impact.
Yeah.
Or we're not.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really what we need to be managing, is our impact on the world around us.
We're living in an extreme right now, and if anything that like the planet has taught us is that extremes aren't the thing that create life. In any sort of extreme, if you look at our elements, if you live too far into, if you indulge too much in the water, then you're drowning yourself. There's floods, fire burns down forests, whole communities, air, tornadoes, like the natural disasters of these elements is what happens when you live in that extreme. It causes destruction. But when we put that into our medicine wheel, that teaches us the flow that needs to happen between all of these to create that balance, to create creation. And that's that you boil that right down to your own internal structures as well. Right? So it starts with right here. You have to figure that stuff out first. If you're in too much of an extreme, if you're living in that chaos, you're not going to be able to create a good life for yourself. So you need to find that balance first. And that balance comes with living sustainably on this land, right? Not living in a sense of consumerism, because you're constantly grabbing at things. You're constantly trying to gain resources, and that's an extreme, right? So
yeah, I think that's really, really good. Like, I was thinking about the creative process when you were talking about that, and with creativity, or creating something rather than consuming something. Like if you're creating, bringing stories to life in some way, or you're doing it through food or music or whatever it is that you're engaged in. It's like having like inspired work, but it's like embracing both the death and the rebirth cycles, and it's not always just one, like this capitalistic model of consume and growth forever. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's going to crash. Like, it is. You see systems cracking and crashing. Look at our climate.
Fighting so hard to stay alive, which makes sense, because nothing on this planet that is alive wants to die, right? When it feels like it's about to, it's going to be clawing.
Yeah.
at whatever it can to just like pull itself out of the water or out of the hole that it's been digging itself, right?
Yeah.
But we need to understand that that's what that is.
Yeah.
And that's the world that we're living in. It's
Yeah.
the same thing with the ego. Like the ego is viewed as such a harsh thing, right? You need to get rid of your ego if you want to live a good life. But your ego was there was put there to keep you alive.
Right.
Right. So when you're actively trying to like this new age sense of like being spiritually aware or being mentally aware with yourself is like to destroy your ego, that's an immediate negative connotation on something that's supposed to be something to learn from.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of
right?
you. So it's
Yeah.
like having that imbalance and being able to check yourself, or that's what the teachings are for, so that you can recognize that in yourself
and to walk alongside it.
Yeah.
Not destroy it.
And to see it in others without taking it personally. Like, we're all walking our own path. We're all here for our own work, and it's interconnected, but like, you can't experience something for somebody else or to think that you know what they need, or to whatever, like you have really no idea.
No,
you really don't.
And when we blow it up to look at like the harmful effects of capitalism, or the benefits that capitalism has brought us to this point, there's still a lot of dualities there. There's still a lot of mirroring, right? Like we know the ramifications, the harsh ramifications of capitalism, but there's always that argument of like, oh, well, capitalism brought us this, capitalism brought us that, right? It's like, yes, I understand that we are now living in an empire of modern civilization that has never been experienced before, not in this human lifetime, right? Maybe like
maybe it crashed, maybe it was way better before, and we're just coming back in this really messed up way.
Yeah. And that these are things that I don't think in our lifetimes we'll ever fully get the full answer to, but we have that inkling of there's stuff coming up with that all the time.
Yeah.
Like when I was in high school, I was under the understanding that Egypt was the oldest civilization, but now we're finding things that predate Egyptian civilization, right?
We call it predates, and Secwépemc predates the civilizations there by thousands and thousands of years.
So history is always going to be rewritten, right? And but to view it at that point of like, oh, it's gotten us so much farther than any other sort of structure has, we can view that as trauma too, right? When we think about finding your way back to yourself from abuse and stuff like that, and like even getting out of a sense of survival, these tools that got you to this point were great to get you to this chapter of your life. Do you need them now? Or do you need them in the way that you did to get you up to this point? Maybe there needs to be a shift.
Totally.
Maybe we can take the good from these tools and leave the things that are hindering us from moving forward. Why can't we look at these political structures in the same way? There is some good that came from capitalism, but there's a lot of bad too. So instead of just taking it as a whole, or taking communism as a whole, or any of these other structures, why can't we just pull from what's good and get rid of what's not serving us anymore? Why does it need to be a fight? Why does it need to be, I'm on this team and you're on that team? Why does it need to be all these different extremes, right? If it's either capitalism or communism or fascism or anything like that, anything with an ism on it is an extreme. And we need to realize that we're living in an extreme right now. We need to find our way back to balance.
I'm really interested in learning more about our, like one of the things that we're doing right now in Nuxalk, Olympia, is we've built a home in our ancestral village. And so we've been really learning about what is our ancestral governance system? How do we live by that? What do we need to actually do? What actions do we take? Like, how do we do things? Who do we include? What are my responsibilities? Like, where do I need to be bringing people in? How do we keep things transparent? How do we make decisions? How do we move forward if we're wanting to do this? So we've been really focused on that. And that requires understanding of the language, that requires understanding of genealogy, that requires knowing actually where are the village boundaries, like where are the families from? What are the protocols for working with the hereditary chiefs and the matriarchs? How do you bring the children up in ceremony? So it's like full circle governance from birth and even before birth, because there's protocols while the mama is pregnant. that you have to follow. So like full life circles. And it's really interesting when people, like culture can be really invisible as well. You know, like how you do things can be very different. Like I always find it interesting when you go to different Indigenous communities, the similarities and the differences, say when there's a death, because I think a lot of the protocols have really remained for in our communities when there's a death. So in some places, like here, when there's news of the death within the family, the home where the person lives, or the immediate family where the wake will take place, they'll light a fire, and the fire will burn 24 hours until all of the funeral work is done. And in some other places, they don't do that, right? Or the burning of food as an offering. People do it in different ways. Or if you have a sweat lodge, there's different protocols for doing that. So it's always interesting to see what's similar and what's really specific to that area. And taking all of that in and being like, yeah, like this is the version here. Yeah. This is what has come about here for the history and the people who've been involved here. And being able to learn from that and embrace that without being like, oh, they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's different, right?
Yeah, you're putting up a wall, like a wall in regards to knowledge sharing. What? Why are we doing that?
Yeah,
because the ego is getting in the way.
Yeah,
because you're choosing your way over any other sort of way, regardless on which community you come from. You're pulling yourself back from experiencing the full human experience.
Yeah, and like all of these binaries that exist, and that's really, you know, from capitalism and English and, you know, all of this stuff. Like there's so many words in English. Like we could talk for an hour in English.
Yeah.
And not say anything.
Anything of substance.
It could just be all rhetoric
Absolutely.
and blah, blah, blah. Like you see that in political forums a lot where they don't really say anything, but they're saying words, but it doesn't mean anything. Any sort of political
debate. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But in our languages, you have to say what you mean. You have to be to the point. So that's why a lot of times I think it's funny when you have like a Native person whose first language is their own language. And then when they go to speak English, they sound really blunt. They're very direct, and they'll just tell you, because that's how we speak in our language, you know. And my mom was telling me about, she was going through all of these historical books, and she said there was this one journal from one of the forts, and it said something like, the Indians are picking up the habits of the white men, and they're starting to lie. They're learning how to lie, because in their own language, your word was everything.
Yeah.
Right. And especially coming from an oral culture, oral histories, the spoken word was very powerful, and you had to mean what you said, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's really interesting in English how you're saying like English is really connected with capitalism and how we speak and, you know, the way it's formed. And so many of the words from around the world that are adopted into English where they didn't have a word for it, you know, in England, which, you know, it makes sense that it would become going looking for riches when it was on this rock, this island in the north. It was cold, you know, where all these other places had so many other riches.
Well, the colonization culture is derived from so many different cultures.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's because it comes from that resource mindset.
Yeah. So if you're looking like what's happening here in our homelands, and you look what's happening in New Zealand, and you look what's happening in other places that have been colonized, especially by like the British Empire, we're going to have very similar experiences, those systemic pieces of colonialism. And those are still happening today. People think it was 500 years ago. It's like, no, we're still living under the Indian Act. Canada's a colony of Britain.
We're still in that structure of colonization.
Totally.
Like even with the first wave of like the first colonists, the first settlers that came over here, there was a blueprint. By the time they came to this shore, they knew exactly what they were doing.
Totally.
The peaceful trade, the setting up peaceful trade routes, and then like leaving for these goods to take disease over tens of thousands of Indigenous people. By the time they come back in the second wave, all of their warriors are gone. All of that pushback, all of that resistance is now gone. It's so much easier to assimilate and destroy a culture when you put a bioweapon in. So it was structures like that that they knew There was phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4.
Yeah,
We're still in
total
those
playbook.
phases.
Totally.
Yeah.
June 4th, 1862 was the day that smallpox was introduced to Nuxalk. And it was a day recorded that there were no Indians in the valley because they knew that that was the day that it would be implemented. It's in all of the books. Like, people try to argue. We post stuff online. We're sharing about what we're doing, and people are just wild in the comments. Like, it's pretty wild out there. And, in some senses, it's like, I think, like, people, I say, you don't know this stuff because it was systemically hidden from you.
Yeah.
Right. And you were taught a very specific history, and you were taught a very specific system. That's the colonial system. Like, people think that only Indigenous people have been colonized. It's like everybody's been colonized.
The first colonizers were the first colonized.
Yes.
We need to remember that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And so it's like, if you don't know about this stuff, it's because that's very deliberate.
Yeah.
And so if you're seeing it and you're getting really triggered by it, or you're like, that's wrong, and yet you don't have any experience with it. Like, so we have people in our comments saying, like, oh, you were conquered. And it's like, no, we weren't. We know our history, and we know our law, and we know our bloodlines, and we know all of the things that continue to make us who we are. And we know exactly where we come from. Like, we built a house exactly where we come from. And for people who don't know their lineage, or they just kind of know they're generally white and will call themselves, well, I'm a Canadian. It's like, but what is your cultural heritage? Like, what is your like, where were your ancestors from? And they're just like, I don't know. Yeah. That's why all these DNA tests, they're trying to figure out where they're from. And it's like, so if your test comes back that you're like 100% Swedish, that doesn't make you Swedish.
No.
It means you have that ancestry within you. But like, if you're trying to use that specific test to tell you who you are, like, you really have some identity. You're really disconnected.
Severely disconnected.
Really disconnected.
If you do not know where you came from, like, and I'm talking about who came before you, specifically who came before you, and the teachings that they have went through that were supposed to be passed down to you. How are you supposed to develop any sort of knowledge on how to move forward into the future? If we don't look into our past, if we don't look into our history, then it's bound to repeat itself. And it's been doing it over and over and over again. We're seeing it now with what's going on in the world.
Totally.
Like the parallels that are happening. And to date this episode, 10 years from now, if people decide to watch this, like, whatever, if there's going to be a 10 years from now, let's
yeah
anyways, but the parallels that happen at the beginning of World War II, we're seeing almost the exact same thing play out now, just with different players on the field.
Yeah.
Right. And there's too many people that are blind to that right now, and are just going along with what is being told to them. Right. Yeah.
I mean, oh gosh, there's so many examples of terrible things happening right now.
Yeah.
And, we as Indigenous peoples, we can see ourselves in those stories because it's happened to our people.
Absolutely.
And like, that's happening all over the world right now in so many different places. Like, it's live. And for people to just discount it or say it's in the past or whatever, it just really shows their privilege, that it just doesn't impact them. They're living in the benefits of those systems, and they don't want things to change. And there's a lot of fear of, like, land back. Oh my God, they're going to kick me out of my house. That's
like, never what land back has been about.
Never. And that's always the first thing that comes up.
But the thing that's frustrating is that like, that whole movement has been very clear from the get-go.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
There's a lot of willful ignorance. There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of classism, patriarchy. People are kind of locked into what they know, and not everybody. There's a lot of people who are really, working hard to educate themselves and to shift, and who are like realizing things and being like, why didn't I know this?
Yeah.
How come nobody told me this? And I've just been benefiting from this without even realizing, so there's the whole gamut, right? There's a whole spectrum. But what I really find inspiring is that so many young people are just seeing right through all the facade.
Yeah.
And they're like speaking truth to power.
Yeah, I have so much respect for the generation after me and the generation after that one, because the the amount of disillusion that is being born into these generations is strong. So there are it's almost like they're seeing just right through it immediately.
Yeah, there's clarity around
right?
it, and
Yeah.
they're just like this is just wrong.
Yeah.
Or even things like with I remember listening to a friend talk about like with all like the gender and the pronouns, and they were saying like, I made a mistake and I was like profusely apologizing for it, and my daughter was like, Mom, like chill out. Just be like sorry and move on and just correct the gender pronoun, like oh okay, no problem. And so like things like that where it's they're just more, I think, open and accepting.
Yeah, well, and the idea of, well, the conversation of just emotional wellness and emotional growth is much more stronger these days. So the younger generations, like that's a conversation that is like being brought to their forefront to most of that generation. Well, I guess a better portion of it than my generation, like your generation, the generations that came before us. So it's a lot more it's a lot more prominent, right? So even when it comes down to just having that emotional wellness in the household and just being transparent opposed to just protecting your kids from the world, which is impossible. And then just acknowledging when you do find yourself in the wrong.
Like my mom talks about, like, we didn't have seatbelts and car seats when you were a baby.
You only know what you know.
Yeah, right? And then it's like, and we also didn't know, like, we were told to smoke, to relax. We didn't know it caused cancer. I mean, the cigarette companies knew.
Oh, 100%.
Right? But like this level of education and shifting systems, and like kind of this veil is being pulled back.
And like the being able to look back through history and like what our parents have went through with being lied to by structures that we were told we were supposed to trust. Right, and that continuous lying that's been going on, we can see it now, and the newer generations see it full force. Like it's disillusion central, right? So we have some little activists that are rising up to the surface real quick, and it's really cool to see a whole generation of just people that are sick of it.
Oh
right?
yeah, so. Like I mean things are very dangerous right now in terms of like ecological collapse. Like this is real. It's like
we're on
real.
The edge.
Yeah,
right?
like it's happening. There are species that are just completely getting wiped off the earth. Like every
quickly to even do anything about now.
Totally. And it's like, what are those impacts? Because they are connected to everything else, right? So doing our work of trying to raise awareness around like land protection is like, we're trying to maintain the integrity of the land. You can't have hyper extraction, industrial extraction without having major impacts, like Mount Polley mine disaster is an example of that, right? Yeah. Major deforestation, and then you have major flooding, and then you have these like atmospheric wet rivers and like these heat domes, and things are going super extreme.
Libraries have always been more than just shelves for books. They've been keepers of stories, of knowledge, and of community memory. That's why we are so excited to be able to partner with the Red Deer Public Library to help amplify and preserve our Indigenous voices through the Voices of Resilience podcast. Did you know that RDPL memberships are free to all of City of Red Deer residents? Because I didn't. Your library card connects you to thousands of books, movies, magazines, language tools, games, and so much more. Plus, 24/7 access to a digital library that you can access from anywhere. Swing by any of RDPL's 4 locations or visit rdpl.org to sign up, tap into all of their programs for all ages, and reconnect yourself with the immense power of storytelling. Culture lives where it's shared, and this is just the beginning. The measures put in place to try and keep it sustainable. For example, the clear-cut forest, and then bringing tree planters in to overpopulate homogeneous trees into the area, like the same species or the same 2 species over and over and over again. When you take a drone or a helicopter into the sky, it may look healthier when these get fully grown, but it's overgrown with the same type of species of trees. So one invasive species of bug that comes in and specifically goes for spruces, that the acres, thousands of acres are just gone because there's no diversity left over. So
Yeah,
when
it's a big monocrop.
yeah, it's a monocrop. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the word for it.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's why our forest fires are getting so extreme. That's why they're getting so hot, and they're ripping through forests and communities so fast to the point where it's melting steel support beams. You would never see that post or pre-colonial.
No, because our forests were managed and they were totally integrated into like people who don't understand a system, when they see it for the first time, they're not going to see all the complexities, right? Like you think about all of the berry orchards that our people had and maintained, but they didn't do it like. Have you ever seen the Palace of Versailles? And everything is like in France, just outside of Paris. Everything is in like straight lines and like very controlled, and it's like you would never see that in nature, right? So when you're coming from this mentality of control every aspect of the environment so that you can maximum harvest, maximum benefit, sell up market, make your money, all that stuff, like the values that we have in the land here was like our diets were so healthy, right? All organic. And, you know, they were like labor intensive. So we were strong. We were very, very well nourished. We had food put away for the winter. We had stories and culture and all of this, you know, that's coming from a system of plenty for all, not from a capitalistic system of I take it all and you suffer.
Yeah.
Right. So like when we're thinking about going into the forest and, you know, we're harvesting berries, for example, you are cultivating and manicuring as you go with those berries, right?
With the idea of having those crops.
That's right.
Later.
Yeah.
And having that
and the burning and all of these things. But if you've never been part of that system or you don't know what you're looking at, you're going to be like, there's nothing here. It's untouched. It's pristine. You know, and this idea, this concept of wilderness, that it's just wild and untouched, completely erases us from our homelands because we were very much part of those ecosystems.
Well, and that was a selling point for a lot of people to come over to this part of the world, was that it was free land.
Yeah, terra nullius.
Yeah, to take
empty land.
Take it for what you will live a better life out here. It's a land of discovery, but it was already discovered.
Yeah,
and there
was
like no
millions and millions of people.
And there was no conversation of the fact that this free land is being taken from someone else.
Yeah, like in our valley, in Nuxalk, you know, all of these folks who came in, like we have this is within the last 150 years, right? And all of these big ranches and farms, they were all given for free to non-Nuxalk people. And, you know, there's this thing with colonialism that I've noticed. The colonizer will always blame those being colonized of doing what the colonizer's doing, right? Like we see it happening between the colonizer of Israel and the indigenous peoples of Palestine. Yeah. And we're watching this, you know, everything that Israel says about Palestine is actually what Israel's doing to Palestine. Yeah. And so we see that here in our homelands as well. We see it around the world.
So the Frog Lake Massacre was, it's the same sort of thing. In the indigenous communities were being starved out of all of their resources, everything, by the settlers that were setting up, for lack of a better term, shop there. They finally got to a breaking point, pushed to a corner where certain activists from that indigenous community came and pushed back and ended up murdering a handful of settlers.
Sounds like they're war chiefs.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that's something I'm just like, oh, people call me activist, and I'm like, I just doesn't sit with me. And I'm like, those were leaders. Those were war chiefs. Yeah.
But they were looking out for their people because they had no other route to go down, because they were pushed in such a harsh corner that their people were dying and they had to push back. And what happened was those war chiefs were captured and made an example of. And now when people hear about the Frog Lake Massacre, it's always pushed on the indigenous people, when what is being pushed on them was actually what the colonialists were doing in the first place. was
Totally.
destroying their land, destroying their means of living, and actually killing them. So the moment they push back, that gets pushed on our people again.
That's right.
We see that statistic all the time with our incarceration rates. We're not looking into why this is such a huge population. There's only 5% of the population in Canada is Indigenous, but of 3 years ago, 30% of the population of incarceration rates was Indigenous people.
That's huge.
But that's being used as a punishment on our people to further push the idea that we're quote unquote savages or that we're the problem.
Yeah.
With no understanding of why we're there in the
Yeah.
first
What's the systemic context
exactly
of being in that position? Like poverty, that's systemic poverty for sure in our communities. Just the denial or the lack of any kind of like care, real care, complete denial of colonialism. Complete denial of the whole problem.
Yeah.
So,
systemic right down to our education system.
Right? Oh yeah, totally. Like, and like birth alerts, babies being stolen. I find it interesting. Like you watch these old Westerns and you see these like white settlers coming in and they're like buggies and whatever. And they're like, they're going to steal the baby.
Paint them as peaceful as possible. Like, they're just trying to survive on the land.
And they're like, the Indians are going to steal my baby. And it's like, whose babies were stolen and whose babies are still being stolen today? Indigenous babies, right? And they're put into white households and there's still this process of assimilation and colonization. And they're just like, oh, we're just trying to provide them a better home. And it's like, there's nowhere better than they could be than in their own community with their own people on their land connected. And it's like, yeah, there's problems, but why are there problems? Because we're systemically separated from our lands, because we're systemically separated from our families and from our way of life.
And that way of history is wiped. So when you don't understand, when you're not being taught about what the actual history of it, you're looking at this like, oh, well, we're just trying to fix a problem. But where did that problem come from? Yeah. What happened with the residential schools, what happened with the 60s scoop, that was just legalized into the foster care system. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And then you go from that system into jail, or you go from that system to the grave. Yeah. Like all of these things that are put in place to keep our people poor, to keep us, down, to keep us from rising, to keep us from being in the full power of who we are. Like in Nuxalk, less than 1% of our people survived the smallpox and all of the the bombings of our villages. Less than 1% survived. And here we are, our language is still alive. We're practicing governance. We're moving back to our village. Like we're taking on the crown. Yeah. We're taking on the big corporations. Yeah. And so many people are really sick of it. They're sick of the high, expensive prices that are making billionaires trillionaires or whatever. Quadrillionaires. Yeah, like and meanwhile, day to day, people are having a hard time just feeding their families. Like that's real. We live in one of the richest countries on the planet, but we also have gigantic poverty rates. Oh yeah. It is us against the 1% that actually holds all of the wealth. Yeah. It's so true. The way that this governing system operates is through extremes that keep us at each other's throats instead of looking at what the actual problem is. We're blaming each other for the fact that none of us are living a good life. Yeah. I mean, you look at it, the lateral violence in communities is actually what I see. It's very integrated assimilation. It is internalized colonialism, and for people to be taking it out on each other in our communities, or like the band office, chief and council, it's what you're familiar with, right? So like, say for example, if one of my family members was having a hard time, couldn't get any like funding for education or something, like they wanted to take this program, and there was, under the Indian Act and under all of these rules, it's like, oh, well, we only fund this one, like these specific things. And this thing over here, which is valid training and which you could definitely get a job with trades, for example, we don't fund that, right? And so you're frustrated within your community. You're going to lash out against the workers. You're going to lash out against chief and council or whomever. But it's the bigger system, and it's like this racist policy and laws in Ottawa and people making decisions over there
the crown, the colonial system that's putting this on this tiny little village. And then they're like, oh, well, let's have this chief and council, and they can get mad at them. And it's arm's length from us, right? And so when you start seeing the systems and you start like reading the Indian Act, and you're gonna get really angry. It's so bad. And most people have never read it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a good PSA. If you haven't read the Indian Act, go read the Indian Act. There's books based around this whole concept that can make it more consumable, right? Easier to read. But that is the start to understanding the systematic racism that has always been plagued on Canada and the United States, on every other part of the world that has been colonialized by the crown.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
It's just this concept of empire. It's still here, like the British Empire, Commonwealth countries.
Yeah.
And people who wear like Canadian flags around, I'm like, oh, how embarrassing.
And the patriotism is actually like the cringiest thing in these generations.
I saw somebody the other day, and I was thinking, I wonder if they're like they really buy into this mythology of what Canada is, right? Oh, Canada's, Canadians are peacekeepers, and they're
we're so diverse, and we're so accepting of so many different things.
All this stuff, right?
No, but you live here for so long, you understand that there's just as much of a duality here as a place like the United States.
Oh yeah, right? I mean, it's the same colonial systems. I think the United States has just gone like capitalism on steroids, you know,
absolutely.
And like with their military industrial complex and all of that. And it's so awesome to see people, coming out in hundreds of thousands and in millions of people around the world in huge marches saying like, this is not okay with us. Like we don't support this.
Yeah.
And if our governments aren't keeping up, then we need to like take those governments down. Yeah,
well, and even seeing our nations come together. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in Alberta recently.
With all the separatism talk?
All the separatism.
That's so crazy.
Nonsense.
What the hell?
Yeah, I know. It's coming from Alberta. It's actually so refreshing being outside of there for a little bit, just so that I can like see it in reflection, But it's refreshing seeing the treaties coming together.
Oh,
for
yeah.
the first time in like a very, very long time, is standing in solidarity with each other, saying that we are not allowing this to happen. And if we can do that for something as ridiculous as Daniel Smith saying that she wants to separate and be a part of the United States and all that stuff, and then backtracking on it, I can talk about that for hours. But if we can come together for that, then what else can we come together on? And when we're talking about land back, and I really want to get, before we end things off here, I really want to get into what you're doing in regards to that, because I know that's a very huge part of what you guys are doing in regards to, even with how we met with the film program that we were just a part of and stuff like that. But the land back movement isn't about kicking people out.
No.
It has nothing to do with that. It's about having more agency with our Indigenous communities, with our treaties, with our nations, of how this government decides to treat its people and the land that it's on.
In our teachings in Nuxalk, it's really like, for us, land back, when I think about it, it's like physically the land, like physically getting the land back. That's why we built a home in our village, to protect the access to the river, to protect our graves that are currently for sale on a plot of land, to protect from, these millionaires and billionaires coming in and completely taking this beautiful, quiet, intact ecosystem town, and they want to turn it into a big mega,
monetizing it.
Totally, yeah. But like this big mega resort and for rich people, right? And we've already seen the cost of like homes for sale just skyrocket. And so people who are actually from there can't afford to buy a home if they're renting, or they can't even afford their property taxes anymore.
They get pushed out.
They totally get pushed out. So it becomes gentrified and all of this stuff, right? For me, when I think about land back, it's really about reclaiming our responsibilities. It's about moving back to the land. It's about putting our governance systems in place. It's about protecting that river so that we have salmon to eat. It's about teaching our children all of this in the most natural way by actually being there and growing up. So we create these spaces where, we're going to have an event, or we're going to have a ceremony, and we invite people in and we feed them and we share what we're doing. And it's like all about us reclaiming our responsibility and the power over our lives without thinking really too much about like, oh, I wonder how the Crown's going to respond to this. I mean, we knew when we built the house that the Crown would have to push back because that's empire, right? But at the same time, because of the context of it being our village and them calling it a heritage site because it's our village. And I'm like, if you did DNA testing on me with anyone in that graveyard, it's going to match. And we have our genealogy and the whole nation stands behind us. They're like, they have every right and every responsibility to be there. So it puts the government, who's supposedly, you know, following the United Nations Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People, which it's not. It's not. It's totally not. And they don't follow their laws. They break their laws all the time, whatever is convenient for them.
Yeah, the bureaucratic nonsense is something that they're used to manipulating in their favor. Right from the very get-go. Yeah. When all of these were put in place, it was put in place within their language, not our language. Yeah. Right? So, of course, we were screwed over in the initial agreements with everything because we were agreeing to something that we didn't fully understand yet.
Or we're forced. It was totally like under duress, right? Yeah. And like Canada, if people don't know this, if you don't know this, Canada is a corporation. Yeah. Canada is a corporation. You know, it was founded with the Hudson's Bay Company. It was founded with all of the, if you look back into the history of like who was named governor, who was named this, who was named this, it's like bankers and business people. And it was all about coming in to this huge land where there were no European establishments and taking it all as quickly as possible to maximize profit as quickly as possible and to create generational wealth for European descent people, right? Yeah. And so we were in the way. We had extensive trade networks, extensive, beautiful civilizations, you know, very in tune with the land. And that was all a threat to their business, right? Yeah. So that's why there was biological warfare. There was all kinds of like starvation tactics, like everything that we're seeing around the world. Yeah. Those were all used. That's the playbook. They stick with it. Yeah. And, you know, so I think people are really saying like, enough is enough. Like, this is horrific. Like, as a human being, I can't sit here and say nothing. Right. And, you know, people say like it's a genocide that's happening in Palestine. It's a Holocaust. Yeah. They're completely destroying the land. Yeah. You know, and it's horrifying. And to watch it, it's like so triggering because I know that's what's happened in so many places, including within my own bloodline. Like, that's real. It's real, and it keeps repeating. And I think about like white people who have, like, what is their blood memory in their lines? It's war, 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 war. Yeah. Right? And so that's why people fled Europe, to get away from war, to get away from famine, to get away from their own colonization, right? Yeah. To come here and to have a fresh start, like, free land, are you kidding me? Yeah. It's free land within that mindset that, again, going previously in one of our conversations, that you only know what you know. Yeah. Right? So if you only know war, regardless on if you're getting that new start or not, you're bringing all of those teachings with you to another people who aren't used to that. Yeah. Right? And so when people showed up in our valley, they were willing to enforce the laws and live by the laws because they got free land, which they never would have. They came here landless immigrants, right? And so they looked the other way when our villages were being destroyed, when our people were dying literally at their doorsteps. People would crawl to where the white homesteads were to die because they knew they were dying of smallpox. They would deliberately try to die near their homes in the hope that whatever sickness they had would stay with the white people and not carry on in through their village. Like, they were burying themselves in graves. And I remember my grandmother talking about, so it would have been in her grandmother's time when within her mother's time, my great-grandmother's time, because this isn't 500 years ago. No. My grandmother was raised in a longhouse in South Bentinck in Taliew and lived on the land, and they were taken out by the Indian agents and the newly formed RCMP to go to Indian boarding schools, right?
Yeah.
And we know the stories of what happened there, every type of imaginable abuse that happened. But she grew up in that life, right? And people being forced from their homes, people being forced to speak English, being forced to wear, the Western style clothing, being forced to just regurgitate a religion that made no sense for our homelands.
No.
Right. And so like all of these colonial stories and all of the healing that we need to do collectively, like owning that history, owning those experiences, that's a big part of Land Back too. It's like, we have to bring that out into the light. We have to heal this, right? We can't keep denying it. We can't just keep trying to hide it and silence it because it is festering and it is no good for anybody. What I really love to see in Nuxalk with the work that we're doing is for the entire valley, for the entire community, both Nuxalk and non-Nuxalk, to actually come together and say, like, we love this place. How do we work together to protect this? How do our children have a beautiful future here in this way of life? And if they choose to leave and come back or whatever, that this way of life is still here. And that protection of like our sacred sites, like our hot springs, our water, our salmon, our river, the mountains, that they're not going to be like drilled and drilled and drilled and blasted and turned into big toxic pits of mining, debris or whatever.
Yeah.
Like to imagine a future for our children, to imagine a future that is based on, enough for everybody. It's not a scarcity mindset. There's more than enough for everybody. Like how much food, how much that goes to waste because of these capitalistic systems, it's not sustainable. It's crashing. And I think there's so much that our communities have to share. And people know so much without even realizing it. Like there are systems that you're like, oh, well, that's just how we do it. And it's like, yeah, but that was taught, right? That didn't just come out of nowhere, whether it's something that's sustainable or not. And so I think the more that we can share that and break down these walls of fear around what is land back, it's really about reclaiming the land in a healthy way so that we can have healthy communities, right? And that includes all of it. Like, why shouldn't our people benefit from it? We had all of our land taken for so many generations, and people are like, oh yeah, Indians just want a free paycheck. It's like, your ancestors got free land, our land. You benefit from that still. This is a system built by like your ancestors, right, to benefit you. Like, why shouldn't we have some benefit in our own homeland after all we've lost?
Yeah.
It just makes sense. So I think with people pushing back and like for myself speaking out and saying those hard truths, like people don't want to hear that and they get really angry and they lash out because it's threatening to them.
Yeah.
And really it's like, no, what we're trying to do is to create some balance and some reciprocity so that our kids will have something, because at this rate, like we are racing toward a cliff collectively.
Yeah. With our knowledge in general. Every time an elder dies, mass amounts of knowledge are gone.
Language speakers.
Yeah.
Or what they carry. Yeah. It's so wild, like learning our language, how much wisdom is put into like even a single word, like how you use it. Or English. I feel like English is it's very limited, like you're saying, like it's a language of capitalism.
Yeah. So
it's about acquiring, it's about power. It's not really much about relationship and reciprocity and equality and equity, So it's a very different worldview. Yeah.
Right down to the language.
Yeah.
And the language is key. The language is the strongest thing.
Yeah, like the language is expressing your worldview. Yeah. How do you relate in this world? It comes through language, right? And the culture is an expression of it too. So I really love that, no matter what Native community I go to, have you eaten? Did you like some tea? Like, are you okay? Are you well? And I really hope that continues with our younger generations, to be reminded of that, Yeah. Because that's a really good way. That's a good way to be in relationship with people, right?
Absolutely.
Get away from these transactions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like you said, you can have an hour's worth of conversation and be talking about nothing.
In English, yeah.
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 All the small talk, it's weird, hey?
Yeah, I hate it. I actually can't stand it
Yeah.
anymore. Well, thank you for this beautiful conversation and this tea and just this company and the reminder to be able to sit back and focus on balance, which is the key answer, I think, to everything.
And rest,
and
knowing
rest.
how to pace yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And enjoy yourself in this life. We can't be all work all the time.
No.
Yeah,
When you
there's
look
got to
back
be
at your life,
joy.
yeah, when you're looking back at your life, when you know that you have a very limited amount of time left, what are you going to be regretting the most, right? I'm going to be regretting the moments that I spent just trying to hustle towards something that didn't need to be hustled towards. You know, spending too much time working, spending too much time fearing and being filled with anxiety of not meeting deadlines and stuff like that when I could just be enjoying my life. Right?
It's true.
So, yeah.
Yep. And I'd say too, like, be outrageous in what you want to do in this life. Like, don't settle for mediocre. If you
No.
can just be like, you know what I actually really, really would love to do or would want to try, even if I fail, just to have the guts to try. And I mean, who knows? You might be really good at it. Maybe there's a reason that you're so interested. If you've never tried, how are you going to know, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I think of like, if I get to live a very long life, what are some of the things I could be doing now that would be like, oh yeah, that's when I started getting really radical and I started living right from my truth.
Absolutely.
And I started speaking up and saying the things I really wanted to say and didn't just say, oh, well, somebody else will.
No.
Whatever.
That goes against our teachings.
Yeah.
Right? That goes against the bear. Like embody that courage, push past that fear. Right?
Can you tell me more about that?
The bear teaching.
Yeah.
When I explain this to my boys, when I explain this to my men, because we are very lucky to be able to be beside a beautiful river, and we go down there all the time for polar dips, just to dip our feet in, to reconnect to the water. But there's always that like little fear of just getting cold, right? So what happens as soon as you step into that river? Yeah, there's a couple of seconds where you're like, oh, this sucks, and then you climatize, and then you release. After all of that fear is gone, after you understand that you're safe, after pushing through all of that, then you can start to come into yourself again. Then you can have the courage to dig into our other teachings, to dig into our wisdom, to dig into our humility, to dig into our honesty, and to understand what full unconditional love is, not only for other people, but for yourself too. That's where it all starts from. You can't love anyone else around you if you don't love yourself first. Otherwise, you're just identifying yourself in a way that can be too grasping, in a way that can be too codependent. There's not enough of that love within yourself, so you're trying to find that love for yourself in other people, right? And that's when you can start hurting not only yourself but the people around you, right? If you have no love for yourself, how are you supposed to show love to anyone around you?
True. I mean, you see people walking around in life like that.
Absolutely.
And, you know, to be able to have compassion for them and being like, oh man, I remember what that feels like.
And that shows humility too. And that's what this is all, a big web. You can't have just one teaching. You have to embody all of them in order to be able to put yourself in a situation where you can start living a better life for yourself. You can't see truth without having the courage to dig into the harsh honesty of how you're living on this planet, right? You can't have love for someone else if you don't see them eye to eye within humility, within a sense of humbleness. If you're putting yourself above people, or if you're putting yourself below people, you can't have love, right? So yeah. little side quest there.
No, I think that kind of summed it all up. The whole conversation, really.
Well, and that's what drew me back to Indigenous teachings in the first place. Was like I lived very outside of culture for a very long time, and I had no sense of identity whatsoever. The moment I started reconnecting to that part of my bloodline, this is the moment I started connecting to our teachings, and those teachings made the most sense to me because they're rounded in nature, and everything from the trees to the leaves that are around us. If you look closely at a leaf, it mirrors the circulatory system in our bodies. If you look at a galaxy, it mirrors the iris, right? It's it's a huge cycle into everything. So why not take the teachings that are based on this land into ourselves? Our 7 sacred teachings show us how to live a better life, not show us how to get closer to God, not anything like that. It doesn't put a middle person between us and what that higher creation is. It shows us that we are that higher creation. We can live on heaven or we can live on hell. It's not a sense of like we have to do as much good as we can in life to get through one gate or the other. Heaven or hell is where we are right now. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's I guess that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, I love it.
I just want to leave this platform open to you to share anything that you are currently doing in your community, anything that you are looking that you're excited for or are very passionate about that you are wanting to raise awareness of.
Well, right now we are still finishing building our home in our village, and we are up against a trespass notice from the province of BC. And they have basically agreed to hold for now until we have a conversation and discuss what's going on and what will happen next. And so one of the things that we will be asking for is if you support the work that we're doing, to write a support letter to us. And to right now, we're just using one platform for myself, Nuxalk Village, which is on Instagram. The Gmail is on there if you want to write a letter for that. There's also a petition in our bio if you'd like to sign that, and that's mostly just to raise awareness and to show like it's an international petition. So we've actually had a lot of people from all over the world signing it, which is really it's just blown my mind how generous people are, like really finding each other who are and then the other work will be pushing back on telesports. So I've been having a lot of fun tagging them in posts and letting the community know what they're up to and their sneaky little tactics and and that is big business trying to push its way into our small community. So be aware of heli skiing if that's something in your community, and also if you have mountains in your homelands, be aware of like deglaciation with all of the climate change. Our glaciers are melting at an unprecedented rate. And so what's happening is as those glaciers come back, mining companies, exploration companies are coming in and they are drilling holes, looking for gold, looking for lithium in South America, looking for nickel and all these different things that they need for electrification, right? So, solar panels are not green technology.
No.
Right? There's a lot of extraction. There are many, many Indigenous people who are being poisoned every day or who are being killed or disappeared or, oppressed in some way so that all of these new technologies can just be pushed through. Like, be aware of AI and how much energy that uses when you use AI. Prompt. Every prompt, like you can use your brain, you're smart, and so like all of these things that that we're doing in our village, it's to raise awareness around like all the land sales need to stop. Enough already. Like our land can't take any more load, right? It can't take any more major extraction. We need to protect our water. We need to protect our glaciers. We need to protect our salmon. Those are keystone species for so many different, like our forests are built on the bones and the bodies of salmon, right? And like these major clear cuts and the old growth forests, like in all along the Northwest coast, we have it's coastal temperate rainforest, and it's one of only 3 places in the entire planet where you have coastal temperate rainforest. It's really, really important for the planet health to have these systems intact. So we need to stop all the logging of these old growth systems and these rainforests, because they won't become forests anymore if they're just tree farms. And like you were talking about, then they're just, strike a match and they're gone.
Yeah.
So I think if people can, think about what kind of a world would you like to live in? You personally, like, would you like to eat good, healthy food? Would you like to have clean, healthy air? Would you like to have some peace and quiet and be able to see the stars? I was shocked. I learned there are people in the world who've never seen the stars.
Yeah.
I think people are just craving it so much, and
They're
they don't
craving
even
something
realize.
different.
Yeah, like they're wanting something real. They want something authentic. They want to be part of something. It's like your disconnection is from like yourself and the earth itself and community. Like all of those things, to me, though, all of those things is what Land Back is about. It's about returning to, to more sustainable way of living. It's about consuming and extracting less. It's about working together collaboratively in relationship with those around you and sharing those benefits. And like, you don't need to be a billionaire to have a good life.
No.
Those are some of the things that I think about. And I think that the work we're doing, we have a lot of support, and we have a lot of quiet support as well. And I think those people are really important too, because they're just kind of quietly witnessing and not really sure how to get involved. And it's like, just take the leap.
Yeah.
Say hello. Start building relationships.
Start a conversation.
Start a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah. Like, where can I help? That is if you're ever wondering like how to start this, is that simple. Where can I help?
Or I have this skill. Is this useful to you?
Yeah.
I've got this idea that I could lead. Would that be helpful for you?
Well, thank you again for your time.
Yeah, it was really great.
For your space as well.
Yeah, this is my retreat space here. My brother built this deck and out of the trees from our land, and my son built our house in our village out of the trees from our land.
Yeah.
So it really does feel really, really special.
This land's given me many inspirations.
Good.
Where I see myself as well, specifically these.
Yes, these are amazing.
And we'll see how this translates on camera for myself, because I have been all over the place.
I mean, that's really the magic of it. I've been really disciplined sitting here.
Yeah, no, you've been still, and I've had to pull myself back a couple of times because I've been like this. I'm like, oh, she's really like, she knows how to do this. I should maybe take some lessons here, take some follow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you again. This has been an amazing conversation and so much knowledge. Like just from myself, I've learned so much from you. So I have no doubt this will translate to others that are looking for some routes to go down in regards to helping with this land back movement, to helping with bringing people back to sustainability, or even just their own healing journey, trying to reconnect with themselves, trying to reconnect with something that they feel is bigger than what they're brought up to know, right? So.
Yeah, like I tell people too, like we're all here by design. We're all here to do, what it is that our life is about. And when we meet people along the way, I think that's part of it, right?
Absolutely.
And also, if you're in a bad situation, you can leave.
Yeah.
You can take care of yourself. You can choose yourself.
Yeah.
Like, please choose yourself. Be well. Love yourself. Take care of yourself. Make sure you're safe. That's so important. And all those voices in your head saying you're not good enough, that's colonialism.
That is.
Don't listen to it.
That's colonialism, and that's living too far into the future.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So have some tea. Go help your auntie.
Yes. Yes. Talk to your grandma, please.
Talk to your grandma. Call your mom.